Hey, what's up everybody? I'd like to welcome you to another audio programmer tutorial. And in this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through how to create a plugin project with JUCE. JUCE is a very popular C++ programming framework that companies and indie developers alike use to create their audio apps and plugins. I'll show you how to create a project two ways. The first is using JUCE's built-in project manager called the Projucer, which is a great tool for beginners. If you're getting more advanced and want more configuration options, then you may want to check out the second way that I create the project, which is using CMake, which is a C++ build system. If you're ready to take a deeper dive, I invite you to check out our book, The Complete Beginner's Guide to Audio Plugin Development. This is over 450 pages of goodness on everything that you need to know to create your first audio plugin. You can get it now on ebook or on physical copy via our website, theaudioprogrammer.com. I'd also like to welcome our new sponsor, JetBrains. If you're serious about audio software development and want to have a similar user experience between Mac and Windows, you should check out their IDE called CLion for C++. I've been using it for a little bit over a year, and it's helped me to fast forward my development journey exponentially with some of the great tools like their built-in CMake support and AI code assistant. In this video, I'll show you how easy it is to get started with a JUCE project using CLion with CMake as well. And without further delay, let's get started. Okay, so in this first part, I'm going to show you how to create a project using JUCE's built-in project manager called the Projucer. So this is a great way to get started if you are diving into C++ for the first time. And it's also great for experienced developers as well. I know a lot of experienced developers who still stick with creating their projects and using the Projucer. So this is a great tool. I absolutely love it. And the way that you get started, if you've downloaded JUCE and you've installed it, then you should have an app called the Projucer. So you go ahead and click on that to open it, and this will bring you to your project manager. So on the left-hand side here, we see that we have some different templates that we can create. There's also a great section where you can open examples of JUCE projects. There's all different types of example code that's fantastic. So I highly advise you to check that out. What we're going to do is we're going to create a plugin project. So if you go down here to the section that's called plugin and go to basic, then I'm just going to click on that. And now I just need to give my project a name. So I will just call this test plugin. And I will just give you a very brief overview of some of the most important sections of this Projucer. And maybe a little bit down the line, I'll go into a more in-depth breakdown, but I'll just show you the most important parts that you need to know for now. So this section down here called modules is a set of different libraries that JUCE will be using to create your plugin project. So JUCE is really a collection of libraries. So these are the libraries that we'll be using, and you don't need to do anything there. And then down here you have what's called exporters. So exporters are the different types of IDEs that you use. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, and that is essentially where you're going to write your code. For Mac, that would typically be XCode, or for Windows, you would have Visual Studio, and then you have other different types of IDEs that you can use. The one that I like to use is called CLion, and I'll show you how to build a project using that in just a few minutes. And that is essentially all you need to know for now about creating your project. So down here in the bottom right, you have this Create Project button. I'll go ahead and click that. Now it asks to save it to a location. We'll save it to the desktop. And now we see that we have our project here on our desktop. Once again, there are a lot of different sections in here and a lot of deep options, but I'll show you the most important ones for now. So in this first tab, you have what's called the File Explorer, where you see your actual source files. And there are 4 source files here. A plugin processor.cpp and .h, and a plugin editor.cpp and .h. And I will explain what those are in just a few minutes. Down here, Once again, you have your modules, which is the collection of libraries from JUCE that you're actually going to use, or that JUCE is actually going to use to create this plugin project. Then down here at the bottom, you have your exporters. And in this case, we're going to be using XCode since we're on Mac. Another very important section here in the Projucer that is often overlooked is where you can actually decide or tell the plugin whether you want it to be an instrument or an audio effect or a MIDI effect, and also set the plugin name and some of the basic information for your plugin. The way that you do that is using this menu that's right above File Explorer. You see this little settings sprocket here, and we just click into this. And in here you have a whole bunch of other options. So if you wanted to change the project name, your company website, your company email, you would fill all of that in here. Then here you can also select your plugin formats. So in this case, we're doing VST3 and AU. You need some special permissions from Avid in order to build AAX. That's a tutorial for another time. And then you have down here plugin characteristics. So currently what we're building is an audio effect because none of these are selected at the moment. But if we wanted to build a synthesizer or a sampler, then we would want to select plugin MIDI input. And if it was a synthesizer, plugin is a synth. Okay, so that's what we would do if we wanted to create those types of plugins, an instrument plugin. But I'm going to unselect those. And then if you wanted to create a plugin that has MIDI output, you would select this, of course. And if you wanted to create a MIDI effect plugin, then you would select this last option here. Down here a little bit further, you have some important information like your plugin name. You can also write a description for the plugin, and you can put yourself as the manufacturer in this section. And there are some other sections in here as well, but those are the most important things for getting started with creating. You don't need to do anything with any of those options. What we're going to do is we're going to go over here to the center, and we're just going to click this button that says Save and Open in IDE. And now we've opened up XCode. And what I'm going to do, sometimes Xcode just opens up these random things over here on the left-hand side. I like to just close all these down, just keep things nice and simple. And what I'll show you here is that here in test plugin, this is your project, and then here's where your source files are. So the ones that we saw just now in the Projucer. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just try to build this, make sure that it's actually building properly. So one thing that I'll show you is here in the center section is what is called our targets. Okay, this is our target window. As you can see, here it is. It says that our current target is standalone plugin. Then it has a one that's called shared code. And then you have, I'll skip manifest helper. And then you have AU, VST3, and all. So typically for an audio plugin, you would be building typically an AU and a VST3, possibly an AAX plugin if you're doing that for Pro Tools, but that's a different story for another tutorial. What I like to do is first start out by trying to make sure that it builds using a standalone plugin mode, which means that we don't need to open a DAW or anything to just make sure that this works. So now I'm just going to go ahead and build this using Command R or by hitting this arrow key here in the top left. So it's something very similar for Microsoft Visual Studio. If you're on Windows, it's not too different. And now we see that we have build succeeded. And we'll wait for a moment and we see our test plugin. So it's just a blank window that says Hello World. So now we can see that we've successfully created a project using the Projucer. And now I will show you how to do the same thing using CMake with XCode. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to get set up with CMake and JUCE. And I will show you how to do this with XCode on Mac. I'll show you how to do it with Visual Studio on Windows, and then I'll show you how to do it with CLion. So we got quite a bit of work to do. So as I said before, CMake is a build system that offers a lot of flexibility, especially for developers that have complex needs, things like bringing in libraries and specific configurations for whatever operating system that they may be working on, and so on. So it's very flexible, and it can look a little bit overwhelming when you first get started, but fear not, we have a template that I'm going to show you that will be the most simple template that you can use to actually get started. And another thing that I'll say is that there are some other great templates that are out there for using CMake with JUCE. There are two that come to mind. One is from Jan Wolfschek from Wolf Sound, and another one is from Sudara. They both have great CMake templates. And another thing that I'll tell you is that each person has their own approach to how they do things, how they choose to bring in JUCE, the different other libraries that they choose to bring in, depending on what their needs and what their preferences are. So I will link all of those, including my template, in the description below, and I encourage you to check them all out because it's great to get familiarized with how these libraries get brought in and how things get done and different approaches to the same problem. So with that, let's go ahead and take it away. So the first thing that I'll say is that there is some good news and bad news. So the good news is that if you go into the JUCE folder that you first got when you first cloned or downloaded JUCE, and then go into the examples folder and then into CMake, you'll see that there are actually some templates that are already set up if you want to build a GUI app, console app, or in this case, an audio plugin. So that's the good news. The bad news is that this doesn't unfortunately build out of the box. And I wish that I could tell you that you could just grab this project, copy it, and then just hit build, and that everything will build nice and fine. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And the main reason for that is that I think that the JUCE team wanted to leave it a little bit open for the user in terms of how they actually wanted to include JUCE within their project. And there are a couple different ways you can do that. And I'll go through those in a moment. So the first thing that I'll show you is that there's no Projucer, right? There is just this text file called CMakeList.txt. So this is the way that this needs to be written. So there needs to be a file that's actually called CMakeList.txt, and this is your configuration file. It needs to be spelled exactly like this. And then once you open it, then you'll come to this this bit of code. And this all looks very intimidating at first, but don't worry, I will walk you through each one of these parts. Just to show you what the JUCE template looks like, it has all of the basic stuff, but the main thing that I wanted to show you, which is the reason why I don't use this JUCE template, is because there's no way that it actually, no default way that it actually brings in JUCE. So you'll see here that that there is some kind of templated code here to help give you an example of how to do that. But there's no default way of how that's actually done. And there are a couple different ways that you can do that. One is using what's called fetch content, which is CMake's default way of bringing in libraries from the outside. In my case, I'm going to use a package manager called CPM, which is a way that you can easily bring in once again, libraries, packages, repositories from the outside. You can also use Git submodules if you want to, and you can also link to your local copy of JUCE as well. But I'm going to use CPM, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. And then I'm not really going to go through much more of this JUCE template because a lot of this is also in the template that I'll show you, which is my simple minimal template. And I will walk you through each one of those parts in my CMake file. So looking at my simple template, you'll see that I have put all of my source files into this source folder. Okay, this is just the way that I like to do it. You don't need to do it this way, but this is just the way I like to do it. I like to keep things organized. And then here at the very top, I have my CMakeList.txt. So let's go ahead and pop this open. Now this isn't going to be a comprehensive CMake tutorial. We actually have some great tutorials for that are here on the channel, so I encourage you to search for those. And there are some great ones from Ben. So check out his tutorials that we have here on the channel. And Ben Vining is his name. And he has some great tutorials that walk you through exactly what CMake is and just walk you through the philosophy and everything. But the purpose of this is just to give you a very brief walkthrough. I'll show you how some of these options actually connect with and compare with the Projucer options. And then I will show you how we actually build this. So I'm going to show you how to build this on Mac here. I'm going to show you how to build it on Windows, and I will show you how to build it on CLion, which works for both Mac and Windows. So just going down through here, I'm not going to go through every line of code, but we have a project name. Okay, so this just corresponds. If we go here to the Projucer, if I go into my settings sprocket that I showed you before, you'll see here that we have a project name, right? So that's just where you've set that. Then down here you have your C++ standards. So we're working with C++ 17, and you'll get the syntax of this over time. Okay, so I know this probably looks like it may be coming a little bit out of nowhere if you're doing this for the first time, but don't worry. So once again, I think that's in this menu, maybe not. But yeah, C++ 17 is what we're using. That option is in there somewhere. Then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go through these little options here. They're not really important. But what I'm going to show you next is the way that we actually bring JUCE into this project. So in this case, I'm going to use a package manager called CPM. So the first thing that I need to do is check and make sure that I actually have CPM downloaded. And if it hasn't been downloaded, then to download it and put it in the right folder. And that's all these lines from 11 to 19 are doing. It's just setting some variables here. So we have the CPM download version that I've chosen arbitrarily, and then the location where I want this to go to. And then I just have a little if statement that if we don't have CPM, download it and put it in the right folder. And then I have to make sure that I actually include it into my project. Okay. So once again, these are things that will be covered in a more in-depth CMake tutorial. Check out Ben Vining's tutorials. He'll walk you through what those are. Next is probably one of the more important parts of this CMake file, which is how we actually bring in JUCE into this project. So we're using this CPM add package, which is the way that CPM actually is able to bring in repositories. And then it's just three lines of code there. It's just the name of the library. It's the place to find it. So it's just the actual URL to grab it, and then where you want to grab it from. So you can make it a certain version. So if you wanted to grab JUCE 7, you could do that. In this case, I'm just grabbing it from the latest commit, which is on Origin Manager. Then down a little bit further on line 31, we have our source files. So what I've done is I've just created a name for these. You can call these anything, right? You can call it elephant if you want. Okay, this is just a variable name that that we use a little bit later when we tell CMake where we actually want these files to display when we actually pull it up in our project. And here we have our 4 source files. And as you can see, what I've done is I've put those in source/plugin and then the source file name, right? So this just corresponds to what I have here. Okay, so then, so just to show you very quickly, if I go back to the Projucer, so the source files correspond to the source files that you have if you were working with the Projucer. So same exact thing. One thing that to keep in mind is that if you want to add source files to your project, this is where you need to do it. So you just put them in here, or if you get a little bit more complex with your needs, you can put them elsewhere as well. The next thing is on line 39, which is part of the JUCE CMake API, which is JUCE add plugin. And then what you do is you just give it the project name, and then in here you have all of these different options that correspond one-to-one with the different options that you've seen in the Projucer. Okay, so If I go back to the Projucer into the settings sprocket here, and then scroll down a little bit, you'll see that these things correspond nearly one-to-one. So plugin is a synth, corresponds with is synth. If you need MIDI input or not, if you're creating a virtual instrument or an audio effect, then you would set that to true or false accordingly, and so on. So all of these things just correspond one-to-one with what you would probably see in the Projucer. It's just in this more codey type of way. Then going a little bit further, we had this variable that we called source files, and source files just refers to these 4 source files. And what I've done is I've made those into a group, and so what I'm doing is I'm just showing how I want those to appear in my IDE, which in this case would be XCode. And then the other key thing that I need to do is I need to call this function called target sources, which actually says that I want those files to be buildable, right? So basically I'm modifying them, I'm creating things with them, and I want those files that I'm working on to be buildable, and that's how I do that, using target sources. Down a little bit further, we have some options that you can set using the JUCE CMake API. So there's a page for the JUCE CMake API, but you can just keep this like this for now until you have some different needs. And then down here at the bottom, you have the target link libraries call, which is all of the libraries that you actually want to have access to in your project. So I have all of these. And once again, just going back here to the Projucer and showing you what those correspond to, those just correspond to the modules section here on the Projucer. So as you can see, these things correspond nearly one-to-one with each other, okay? So this Projucer, actually, I'd never really checked, but I imagine that maybe it's running CMake in the background, and this is just a pretty GUI app that you use to modify these things in the background. So that is your CMake file. And like I said, if you are just getting started, then you just want to change some of the key things here, like what the project name is, whether what type of plugin that you want to build. So you want to just flip some of these options true or false. You want to change what the product name is, what the company name is, and things like that. But it's nearly the same as the Projucer. Just don't there are more opportunities to mess it up. So now I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to show you how to actually create an Xcode project from what we have here. So as you can see, we have this folder. In here we have the CMake list. I have my source files, and the CMake list just defines how I want to build my project. So what I'm going to need for this is I'm going to need my command line. So I'm going to open the terminal here, and then I'm just going to change directory. So that's just CD. And then I'm going to just drag and drop this in there to show that I want to be working within this folder here. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call CMake to build this project. Okay. So the key thing here is that you need to have CMake installed. If you don't have CMake installed, I have tutorials for both Windows and for Mac on how to install CMake. Go ahead back to those and follow along, install CMake, and then you'll be good to go. Okay, you'll know if you have CMake installed or not if you just type CMake -- version. And we can see that we have CMake version 3.26. Okay, so that's how you know that you have CMake installed. If it says unrecognized, then you haven't installed CMake yet. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to build. Okay, so I will just clear this just to make everything clear for everybody who's just getting started. So the way that you want to do this is you want to use the command CMake, so CMake, and then what you want to do is do a -- B, And next is what folder that you want to actually put the project files in. So what it's going to do is it's going to create a folder here in your project. And a lot of people call it build with lowercase b. Some people call it build with a capital B. Some people call it builds. So I just like to call it build with a lowercase b. Then next is what type of project generator that you want to work with. Okay, so to do that, you need to use the -G flag, G for generator. And here, since we're working in Mac and since we want to do this with Xcode, I'm going to type Xcode. And I'll show you how to do this in Windows in just a moment as well. So it's Xcode, capital X, lowercase c, like that. And what you'll see is that once we do this, like magic, it will create a folder called build. Okay, so see there, just created this folder called build. Now it's just doing all of this stuff, making sure that you got a C++ compiler here. And if you look through this, a lot of this looks intimidating at first, but what you'll find is that if you just read through it line through line, that you'll see that it's just telling exactly what it's doing. So like I said before, earlier we were talking about CPM, the package manager, and what we're doing is we're taking and we're adding JUCE. And where are we adding it from? The origin master. And then it's using this JUCE aid thing that JUCE built in the background to actually do that. And essentially that's done now. Okay, so it's done everything that it needs to do, and now it's finished. So what we want to do here is we want to go into our build folder. And in here you see a whole bunch of files. Once again, looks very intimidating, but just ignore all of that stuff for now. Okay, so the only thing that you want to be concerned with is your actual project file. Okay, so in this case, it's an Xcode project, and you can tell that it's an Xcode project because it says Xcode proj. And I'll just double click that, and this will now open up Xcode. So same sort of thing as what you were doing with the Projucer, except it's just doing a different type of workflow. And as you can see there, the project itself looks a little bit different, and maybe if somebody has some tips on how to do some moving around to actually make this look exactly like what it would look like if it was built with the Projucer, I would welcome those suggestions in the comments, but this is okay for now. So what you'll see here is, don't worry about all of these. These are just, so we have different types of versions of the plugin that we want to build, right? So one version is the audio unit version of it. One version is the VST version of it. We may want to build the standalone version of this, and we may want to build all of the versions of that. And that's all that is there. Okay, so that's just dispelling all of the complication and complexity that you see here. But the one that I'm going to fold out here is just this one that has my project name here, simple JUCE plugin template. I'm going to go ahead and fold that out, and then I'm going to fold out source, and boom, there we see our source files. Okay, plugin editor and plugin processor. Don't confuse this with the source files down here. This actually has your JUCE library files down here. Okay, so that's just something a little bit different. You can just leave that minimized. I chose to call it source, but I could have called it something else if I wanted to. Okay, and that's where your source files are, and we'll go through what those are a little bit later. But that is essentially how you build a JUCE project using CMake with Xcode. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Windows and show you how to do the exact same thing, but using Visual Studio with MinGW. Okay, so here we are in Windows, and I have the simple JUCE plugin template that I just did in my Mac. And I'm going to show you really where the beauty of CMake shines, if we could call CMake beautiful. Sometimes it's my worst agony, but when it shines, it really shines. And this is one of the use cases, is when we're doing cross-platform use for Windows and Mac. So one of the places where I think the Projucer falls a little bit short is when you're starting to talk about cross-platform use, especially if you're starting to bring libraries in from the outside, and those have different configuration options and so forth. That's where CMake really shines, because you can do that so simply with CMake most of the time. And when you're doing that with the Projucer, you can do that with the Projucer, except what you need to do is you need to do that individually for every single IDE that you're going to use. Okay, so if you want to do that for Visual Studio, if you want to do that for XCode, you have to do that separately, whereas you can just do this once with CMake, and it's designed anyway to work out of the box. So here we are in the repository that I did on my Mac, and I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to say in advance that I need you to excuse me because Windows is not my native operating system that I work on a daily basis. So excuse me if my driving is a little bit sloppy on this side. So first thing that we're going to do is open up our command line, and I don't know what this is. Just going to get rid of that. I'm going to open up mingw, or git bash, which is what I use for my command line. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my development folder. And so what I'm going to do is, a lot of this is the same, which is going to be CD, so for change directory. And then I'm going to drag in my development folder to go here. I'm just going to look at what I have in that folder. So I have this folder called the audio programmer. So I'm going to CD into the audio programmer where I keep my projects. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this repository. So git clone, and then I'm going to paste, or try to paste this in. So 1 second. There we go. And now we are just pasting this in. And now we have our repository in this folder. So I'm just going to show it to you here. Just pull in my folder. Just bring it down here. So here it is. Simple JUCE plugin template, same files, okay? And same project. So that's what we have there. And now what I can do is do essentially the same thing that I did on Mac, except I'm going to do it using Visual Studio. So I'm going to call CMake. So once again, you need to have CMake installed in order to be able to do this. If you don't have it, be sure to check out my Windows setup tutorial for audio programmers that shows you how to set up CMake. So CMake -B, and once again, I'm just going to call this folder build, and then -G. And now what I'm going to do is Microsoft Visual Studio. So hopefully I remember this properly. So you need to put quotes around this, and it is Visual Studio with the capital V, capital S, 17, and then 2022, just like that, in quotes. Okay, and that's how you build a project for using Visual Studio, and you're going to see that it's going to create a build folder just like last time here. So here I am. I'm going to hit enter, and oh, sorry, I know what I did wrong. I need to CD into the folder itself. So sorry. So CD into my simple JUCE plugin template folder. And now I'm going to just go back to that command there. To go back to the command, you could just hit the up or down arrow key there to repeat the command. And now I'm just going to call this, and you'll see there in the directory view, it'll create a folder called build. Okay, so now it's doing its thing, and it will, this is going to take a little bit longer. While it's doing that, I'm going to just show you something really quick that I discovered on ChatGPT. So one of the things that I found, many times, I'll just show you here in my ChatGPT window, directories on Windows are using the angle brackets the opposite way, okay? Whereas on Mac, we tend to use, when we're creating a path, it will be like directory /2, whereas on Windows, it could be like this, okay? And sometimes this causes confusion when you're working on Windows and it's trying to read a Mac path. So one way to fix that that I found through my buddy ChatGPT is to call this little command line, and you can call this from anywhere because it's a global configuration, and this will actually set your angle brackets where it'll read paths from from angle brackets either way. So that's how you're going to be able to do that. I just say that because I had a little bit of trouble on Windows, and that's how I solved it, by running that command. And now maybe I'll put that in the description below as well. So, all right, so we see that now our configuration files have built. We have this build folder. Then here, it's a little bit more immense, but the project that you're looking for is the SLN solution file. Okay, so you see all these VXProj files here. The one that we want is the solution file here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. And that opens up Microsoft Visual Studio. And then while I'm here, I want to give a big shout out to some of the members from the community. We have Roving Eye, Marcel, and Daniel, who actually helped me debug this a little bit earlier. I was having a heck of a time. So big shout out to those three for helping me with figuring out what I was doing wrong with my CMake file. It was something very small, but very important. It was stopping it from building properly. So now we are in Microsoft Visual Studio, and what I can do is I can actually, the way that you do this is you go over here to your simple, to your source folder here, and here you have all of your targets. And what I can do is I can just pick one. So for the sake of ease, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this standalone version. I'm going to right click on this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do set as startup project. So that, see how it's in bold there now? And now what I can do is I can just actually build it and see if we're going to build successfully. So now it's just going to go through this. And if you wanted to build a VST, then you would just, what you could do is you can actually right click on that and hit build directly from this window. So if you right click on this, build is grayed out because we're building something else right now, but you could just hit build and that will just build the VST, or you could build all of them just by right clicking on the all target. Okay, so these are your targets. They call them targets in Mac. In Windows, they call them solutions. Okay, so that's what it is. And as you can see, we have built that successfully. So that's how you build a standalone project or a plugin project using Windows. Okay, so once again, that's the beauty of CMake there, is that we just had this project, had a CMake file, told it where all of the project files were supposed to be and how to bring in JUCE. Didn't have any type of platform-specific messiness, and it just did it, and it worked easily out of the box. Okay, so that's how you build with CMake and Windows. Okay, so we're back here on the Mac side, and one of the reasons that we're back on the Mac side is because I noticed that as I was recording the Windows side, that the max resolution for my Windows machine is 1920 by 1080, whereas I was recording the Mac side in full 4K. So that's the reason that you see a slightly different window size on the Windows part of the tutorial. So I apologize for any inconvenience that may have caused. But speaking of cross-platform experience, I wanted to talk a little bit about today's sponsor, CLion. So I've been using CLion for the past year, and one of the main reasons that I've been using it is for this cross-platform experience. So as you can see throughout this tutorial, we were using a lot of different tools, and we were using Visual Studio, and we were using XCode. And wouldn't it be great if we had an IDE that gave us a very similar or the same experience on both Mac and Windows. And luckily we have that with CLion, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So this experience, once again, is practically identical whether you're on Windows or on Mac. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a project. And you're going to see another thing that I really love about CLion here, which is that what I can do is I can just go to a project that has a CMake list, and I can just hit open. There's no need to do any type of build configuration or needing to run anything in the command line. The CLion has native CMake support within it, and we can look at this down here in the bottom left hand corner. We have an actual CMake section where we can do things like seeing what's happening with our CMake file, because what we can do is we can actually invoke CMake inside this IDE here. And the way that I do that is just clicking on this sprocket, or you can actually click on this recycle button here, reload CMake project, and boom, what you'll see is that it just starts invoking CMake and building our project, which is really nice. Another thing that I'll show you while we're doing that and waiting for that to finish is that you can actually create some complex CMake settings as well, and do some different presets for debugging and release builds and anything else that you might want to do. And you can actually do those with using different project generators. So at the moment we're using Ninja as a project generator, which is a cross-platform generator. But if you wanted to, you could also do this using XCode as the project generator. Okay, so you could use either one of those. And what I could do is, if I wanted to, I could just add another build configuration and just make that a release build if I wanted to, but I'm just going to leave that for now. And then in here we have some different CMake options that are just filled in based on the choices that I've made up here. But I'll go ahead and I'll hit OK, and we see that in here that our CMake file has completed generating the project files, has put them here in this CMake build debug folder here. So that's where all of those go. And what I'll do is I'll just try to build this. I'll build it in standalone mode and make sure that that's building properly. And so another thing that I really like about CLion is that you actually have built-in CMake debugging. Yes, so for anybody who has always wanted to learn how to debug your CMake list, I don't know that there's any other place that you could actually do that other than here in CLion, and I will show you a special video on how to do that. So this plugin has built successfully. But yeah, just wanted to give you a general walkthrough of what I'm really liking about CLion right now, that cross-platform experience, that native CMake support. So if you get a chance, be sure to check it out. A link to CLion is in the description. Okay, so that was quite a ride there, going from building a JUCE project using the Projucer to building a project using CMake and Mac and XCode, to switching over to Windows and doing the same thing but using MinGW and Visual Studio, to coming back to Mac and then using it with CLion and showing all those amazing features. And I hope that you found that tutorial useful. This is one of those tutorials I've been wanting to do for a long time, to show why CMake is so useful, and also just give a comparison and contrast of what that experience is like using CMake versus using the Projucer. So I hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, be sure to give us a like and subscribe. In the next tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the actual plugin files that you have when you first start building a plugin. So mainly the audio processor class and the audio processor editor class, and the differences between those, and also starting to make some sounds, get some sounds running through our plugin, and start actually drawing some things. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope to see you next time. Happy coding.